there's a whole variety of different ways in which drones have been a decisive player in this war. The recent attacks on Moscow show Ukraine's capability to build drones that actually can take the fight to Russia, to demonstrate to the Russians that they are vulnerable, that it's not just Ukrainians who are suffering and dying in this war, but actually their city, their capital city, is also vulnerable. So psychologically, that's important to the Ukrainians, and it's psychologically damaging to the Russians.
Yeah.
But drones have also been important on the battlefield, in that they have been instrumental in surveillance of the battlefield and target spotting for artillery, allowing artillery to be used really like a sniper shot rather than as a barrage, by actually identifying where the targets are. And then, of course, there have been combat drones themselves that actually have been very effective at attacking armor and trenches and groups of Russian troops. And therefore, they're a new form of warfare in the way in which these small things can be armed and used decisively through real-time first-person shooting from a distance controlled by operators.
Yeah, I want to break down some of those thoughts. Going into Russian territory itself, that is, as you talked about, has been quite psychological, hasn't it?
Absolutely. It's psychologically damaging for the Russians. The idea was that this special military operation was a thing that certainly wouldn't affect Russia itself, at least of all the capital. And actually the ability to target and attack the Kremlin, as well as the expensive business districts of Washington, makes Russians feel vulnerable in themselves. And psychologically, when Ukraine has been taking the hits night after night, the ability to actually have the capacity to strike back at the heart of Russia is psychologically important for them. The counteroffensive is slow and grindingly difficult, but this is a way of taking the fight to the enemy directly, immediately, and with tangible results on the TV screens showing damage inflicted on Russia itself.
Does it show an agility and nimbleness by the Ukrainians to so quickly adapt these weapons?
That's another aspect, an important aspect of this, is the way in which the military, industrial, technical sector in Ukraine has had a huge boost, and they have developed the capacity to develop a whole range of aerial systems and other systems as well, in showing the way in which their economy and their society has been able to respond to that threat. And the fact that they now have the capacity to produce systems that are Ukrainian systems that can attack Russia in the Black Sea and Russia in Moscow shows about their technological vitality, as well as their military resistance, as well as their morale to defend themselves. So there's a whole variety of aspects in play here as to what these drones symbolize, as well as what they can achieve militarily.
So in terms of what they achieve militarily, can they actually outsmart more sophisticated weaponry?
Yeah, and the key thing here is the cost-effectiveness aspect. A very cheap drone that can be modified from a racing drone that maybe costs tens of thousands of dollars can take out very sophisticated equipment that costs millions of dollars to produce. And therefore, the Ukrainians are, when they see this reported on their TV screens, they recognize that actually they are having an effect, and they're spending their dollars really well and denying the Russians the ability to occupy their countries. So there's a real cost-benefit ratio that's going on here. And it's a wider lesson here for wider warfare in general. Military equipment tends to be fantastically expensive, and yet what the Ukrainian war has demonstrated is that the ability to modify commercially available technology and use that effectively as a weapon system means that actually you can do things very differently. And through necessity, Ukraine is doing that.
Yeah, but do you think it's going to be the game changer? Do you think it could be something that really longer term could seriously change the course of this war? The
Russians are dug in over 120 kilometre massive front line with the Ukrainians in a way that makes it very difficult to penetrate that. And this is really an interesting aspect of this war. If it was the Americans fighting this war, they would have used air power to carpet bomb those defences and punch your way through, allowing the armour to manoeuvre through. Air power has been absent in this war because the air defences are so good on either side that neither side has been able to use air power in a combined arms way that is effective. Drones can't replicate that because they haven't got the ability to deliver the amount of firepower, of ordnance to the battlefield in the same way. And therefore, drones are having to be used differently. So they're being used to actually guide artillery, to punch holes, and they're being used to interdict the supply lines between Russia proper and the occupied parts of Ukraine. And if they can break that rail and road link to those things, they can starve them of ammunition and supplies in a way that will make it easier to break that front line at a later point. But just now, they haven't yet been decisive.
Yeah. Ukraine says it's now recaptured the village of Urozhain. You're talking about how the Russians are dug in. Do you see this as still being a very slow and difficult task to recapture territory?
It is painstakingly slow for part of the reasons that I've explained in terms of the lack of ability to use a combined arms approach. The Ukrainians thought initially that they could break through the front line and achieve a counter-offensive momentum earlier, but the Russian minefields in particular and the lack of the air power support and the armour in sufficient numbers means that they've taken to a more cautious approach. They're trying to weaken the enemy through attacking their logistical supplies as a longer game. The plan is still to break through and manoeuvre, but they're also being more cautious, recognising the costs of trying to do this against a well-defended opponent. So incursions, minor gains, and interdiction, and the longer game is the strategy at play here in this conflict.
Yeah, great to talk, David. Thanks so much.
Nice to talk to you too. Okay, take care.